Welcome to the Com Analytics channel. This is Boris Zinghausen with you. Today is August 15th. There are a lot of important news stories. In this episode, one more oil refinery in Russia is out of commission. The situation could become critical in the near future. Meanwhile, Alaska greets Putin with banners reading Dictator and Child Kidnapper. Bloomberg names the main goal of Putin's visit to Alaska, and it's definitely not a ceasefire. Meanwhile, Putin stopped by Magadan, admired some fish oil, and visited a very interesting memorial in the context of his trip to Alaska. Hungary, meanwhile, has been left without Russian oil, and the SBU is striking at Ukraine's traitors. We'll talk about this and much more in today's episode. There's a lot of interesting stuff ahead. So if you're new to this channel, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. Let's dive in. So, if you keep joking about Syzran, and those who follow this channel know what I mean, Syzran will remind you of itself. Today, Ukrainian drones attacked yet another oil refinery, this time in Syzran. It looks like they hit exactly where they needed to. Take a look at this video. The Syzran oil refinery is one of the largest in the Rosneft system and is key for the southern Volga region. In general, the reported capacity there is from 8 to 8.5 million tons of oil processing per year. So now, if it shuts down, they'll have to switch and order supplies from other refineries: Novokuibyshevsk, Samarsky, Nizhny Novgorod, and Volgograd. And guess what? Novokuibyshevsk has already been completely shut down after being hit by debris from Ukrainian drones. And the Volgograd refinery also took a serious hit recently. The others are still operating for now, but that's only temporary. Once again, I want to emphasize, the denuclearization of Russia is in full swing. And the strikes on Russian refineries since the beginning of this month have turned into a pretty serious problem for Russia. I'll talk more about that a bit later. But now let's talk about the key event of the day. So, today at 22 Kyiv time, there's a meeting between Putin and Trump at a military base in Alaska. Special representatives, part of the delegations, journalists, all have already arrived. Hundreds of US Secret Service agents have also arrived in Anchorage. And a lot of people in Anchorage have come out for a pro-Ukrainian rally, standing along the road with flags and signs in support of Ukraine. Take a look at this. On one hand, this will be humiliating for Putin, since in his country no one can even dare to go out for a solo protest, because they'd be immediately detained and taken away. Seeing those hated Ukrainian flags and signs saying dictator and murderer along his route is hardly pleasant. I can't even remember the last time something like this could have happened to him. From what I've seen in various videos, there are even banners reminding people of the exact number of Ukrainian children Putin has abducted. All in all, seeing all this will be anything but pleasant for him. Meanwhile, Bloomberg decided not to sugarcoat Putin's visit to Alaska at all. An article comes out saying that the Russian Federation is on the brink of economic collapse. And that's why Putin is heading to Alaska, to a summit with Trump. Naturally, he has no interest in any kind of truce. His economy is on the verge of a cascading collapse, and he wants at the very least for some sanctions to be lifted and certainly for no new sanctions to be imposed. And in its latest analysis, Bloomberg highlights a set of very alarming factors: stagnating growth for the Russian economy, falling oil revenues, and a record-breaking ballooning deficit. So, is it not funny for Iskander anymore, one wants to ask? So why is that? And now about the deficit. It's increasing literally every day. The hole in the budget has already exceeded the annual plan. At this point, the deficit is already approaching 6 trillion, and they had planned for somewhere around 3.8 trillion for the whole year, and it keeps growing and growing. Basically, they have to classify key economic data. They've classified demographic data, trade data, fuel data, and so on. In general, the share of classified expenditures, those that are kept secret, is about a third. Entire sectors have been destroyed, like the automotive industry. Basically, every day there's news that some car factory has shut down. For example, Avtovaz has switched to a 4-day work week. Soon it'll be down to just 1 day a week. The coal industry, Gazprom, and so on. The coal industry, for instance, has basically just died. That's it. Losses in the billions. Yep. By the end of the year, losses will reach 5 billion. Last year, there was a profit of, I think, 144 million. In Kuzbas, 60% of coal enterprises are operating at a loss. So the industry is simply sinking. Gazprom is basically the symbol of decline. Gazprom is exactly what Putin knows how to do. Touch something that works, and not only will it stop working, it'll go flying off a cliff on a burning bicycle. Gazprom has posted a record loss. And by the way, Gazprom is now selling off assets, non-core property, various buildings, recreation centers, part of its vehicle fleet. Well, we've really hit rock bottom. The gas monopoly is also heading straight for the abyss. Putin really is quite the helmsman. By the way, friends, just a reminder, despite all this, Putin, his army is making some truly incredible efforts to bite off yet another piece of land from Ukraine. Just a little bit more, if only. And the situation at the front is not easy. That's why I'm asking you to support an important fundraiser for FPV, for fiber optics, for the 101st Brigade. They are located in Chasiv Yar. That's exactly where the Russians are piling up their own men, throwing in cannon fodder, but still they keep pushing, and their drones too. That's why our people need help there. I'm asking you to support us. There's just a little bit left, just a tiny bit more. I think if we all pitch in today, we'll close this fundraiser. The link to the fundraiser is in the description of this video and also in the comments for our warrior heroes from the 101st Brigade who are defending our country and all of us. I'm really asking you to support this fundraiser. There are private bank details, monobank, and also PayPal for those who want to help from abroad. And as I always say to everyone who helps the armed forces of Ukraine, who supports Ukraine, a huge, sincere thank you from me and from our soldiers as well. And if by chance you're not watching on my channel, here's a QR code. You can use it to go directly to the fundraiser page. Let's help our soldiers. I believe we can close this fundraiser today. Meanwhile, Lavrov arrived for negotiations in the US with Russia. Do you know what's interesting? He was wearing a sweater with USSR written on it. Honestly, I don't even know what to say about that. By the way, did you know that in Russia, there's an entire generation of people who never lived in the Soviet Union but wear t-shirts, tank tops, and sweaters like that, just like Lavrov. USSR. It's some kind of reflex, I guess. I'm from Crimea, I was born in Crimea. Back there, we just had quite a number of these odd people who associated the Soviet Union with greatness, like, I don't know, ice cream for 20 kopecks, those vending machines, 3 kopecks for the sweet drink, 1 kopeck for the plain one, and so on. Basically, everyone drank from the same glass and nobody ever got sick. And in the evenings, the drunks would take the glass, drink from it, and bring it back in the morning. Everyone had heard these urban legends. So that's why he showed up in that sweater. You can tell he misses those times, when they could calmly arrest and execute ministers or people's commissars, their equivalent back then. Tukhachevsky, who else? Yagoda, Rykov. Lavrov definitely won't be allowed to lie about that. In other words, if anything happened, he would have been executed in no time. I think those days aren't far off. And Trump decided to scare Putin a little, to bring him to his senses before their meeting. Although maybe it just happened by accident. So, what happened? Trump said that Putin won't joke around with me, meaning he's not coming here to joke around. So, when he was talking to journalists, Donald Trump was asked whether Putin had prepared a strong position for the meeting. In response, Trump said that, in his opinion, Putin would immediately want to make a deal. I get the feeling that they're all hurrying along. A press conference has already been announced, which means there's a preliminary agreement, although with Putin, things could still turn out completely differently. Here's what Trump said. I think if I hadn't been president, he would have taken over all of Ukraine. This is a war that never should have happened if I hadn't been president. In my opinion, he would have been even more eager to seize all of Ukraine. But I'm president, and he's not going to mess with me. All right, fine. If Trump hadn't been president, the sun wouldn't shine, the grass wouldn't grow. We'll agree to all of that, just go ahead and hit him with sanctions. And it should be noted that when Trump was not president, Putin didn't capture all of Ukraine. In other words, under Biden, he didn't capture it, and on the contrary, he was actually pushed out of several regions and expelled from the only regional center that had been occupied after the full-scale invasion. I'm talking about Kherson right now. That's just for balance. I'm not downplaying Trump's achievements, but just for the sake of balance, so to speak. But it's also worth reminding, again for balance, that it was the administration of Joseph Biden that, almost in an ultimatum-like manner, insisted on this. Several speakers, including Lloyd Austin, who was then the head of the Pentagon, said that we were forbidden to strike Russian oil refineries because it was supposed to somehow disrupt the global petroleum market. Something was supposed to happen as a result. Now we're hitting Russian oil refineries every day. In fact, all the problems from this are mainly for the Russian Federation, and certainly not for global prices or the world energy market. And here's where I have a question. I still haven't been able to find an answer to it. I don't know, maybe you have one. Why was the Joseph Biden administration so concerned about Russian oil refineries? Since the beginning of this month, already more than 10% of refining capacity has been put out of commission. If back then, a year and a half ago, when we were told, no, what are you doing, when we were taking out 2 refineries a night, if we had started hitting them then and hadn't stopped, Russia would have faced a severe fuel crisis within a few months. And to be fair, it should be said that the administration of Joseph Biden had exactly the same sanctions mechanism against those who buy Russian oil and petroleum products. Exactly the same as Trump's. So why was Russian oil a sacred cow for them? It's a mystery to me. I don't know. Maybe you have an answer. Now, as for the claim that this will be a meeting of equals, as they say, that's what they're spreading on Russian television. The Kremlin is trying to present this summit as a new Yalta, portraying Russia as a world power equal to the US and Putin as equal to Trump. For example, Kirill Dmitriev, Putin's negotiator and special representative for the US, compared it to the Yalta conference. Basically, he claims that this meeting is capable of preventing a future global conflict. And as for the rather dim-witted Aksyonov, the one who's the Gauleiter in Crimea, he actually suggested that Trump visit Crimea to sign a new Yalta peace agreement. Well, anyone who was born in Crimea knows who Aksyonov is. He's a former gangster and enforcer. But those are exactly the kind of people Putin needs. Just look at his people, Kadyrov, Zolotov. Someone who's a bit dim, obedient, who calls himself, I don't know, Putin's bull terrier. That's exactly what he wants. Loyal, you see, someone who's absolutely loyal, who's ready to do anything for Putin. That's what he needs. And he found just such a character in Aksyonov. Meanwhile, Russian propaganda is blaring everywhere that people who influence global processes are going to gather. Well, Trump, yes, but not this empty-eyed moth who should be overjoyed, jumping up and down, dancing, celebrating the fact that Donald Trump is pulling him out of isolation. We'll talk about that a bit later as well. And all these comparisons like Putin and Trump will sit down together and decide the fate of the world. Behind this inflated facade, they are hiding the real gap in power between the US and Russia. That is, there can be no equality there at all. Speaking of equality, it's actually quite funny, considering that the GDP of the state of Texas is $400 billion greater than the GDP of the entire Russian Federation. What kind of comparison can we even be talking about here? It must be admitted that Putin has managed things to the point where only 2 global players remain, the US and China. That's it. Russia has rushed headlong into a harsh and binding dependence on China. And so, as they say, here's our segment, a note for the deep people. For reference, the nominal GDP of the US is $30 trillion, China's is $18 trillion, and Russia's is 2. What kind of equality is that? What equality are we even talking about? And even though Trump can now easily keep Putin by the throat, so much so that his Botox will stop shifting from cheek to cheek, by the way, here's something interesting. Well, let's not get into that topic. Despite this, Trump will personally meet Putin upon his arrival in Alaska, where a red carpet awaits him, NBC News reports, citing its sources. There are 2 points of view on this matter. First, Trump cares about results. What he has to do for that, what he has to say, which words he might have to take back later, that doesn't matter, nor does it matter which statements he has to retract and say, yes, I said that. Next question. That doesn't matter. He would even talk to the devil himself if it meant achieving results. Well, in the case of Putin, that's basically the same thing. If you put too much pressure on Putin, show him like, you're in my hands, I can crush your economy like a bug, and especially if you do it publicly, then Putin will slip away and fight for as long as he can. That is, everything over there will fall apart. It'll all go down the drain, but he'll just keep fighting, fighting, fighting. Russians will be eating roots, leaves, I don't know, ground beetles, locusts, it won't matter. It's the same situation in North Korea, but as we can see, no one is overthrowing Kim Jong-il. On the contrary, they run around happily, clapping their hands, great, great. They worship the statues of the father, the son, and the grandfather. Well, that's one point of view. That Trump doesn't care at all. He'll roll out even 3 red carpets as long as there's a result, as long as he gets the Nobel Peace Prize afterwards. That's one point of view. The second, all of this will work. All this legitimization of Putin, normalization of Putin in the short term. But in the long term, Putin will learn from his mistakes and come back with another war, this time in alliance with China, Iran, North Korea, and so on. And that will be a much more global war. So, in other words, Putin needs to be taken down hard, decisively, and right now. And to show the whole club of dictators, we'll wipe you all out if necessary. And the very fact that he will have a joint photo with Trump, that Putin will walk the red carpet, that people will interact with him as if he were normal, this already effectively pulls him out of isolation, dusts off the mothballs, and shows the whole world, look, no one arrested anyone. And Russian propaganda is rejoicing. Wipe yourselves with your International Criminal Court warrant. I and Putin have outplayed everyone once again. So that's one point of view, that the outcome, even if someone has to roll out the red carpet, is Trump. And the second point of view is that all this will lead to, even the way Trump is going to handle things now, to even worse consequences, which will then be hard to sort out. By the way, write in the comments which point of view you lean towards, or maybe you have your own take. And Putin, by the way, ended up with a very interesting set of locations before flying out to Alaska. So he decided to stop by Magadan and visit a fish oil processing plant. But that's not really a big deal. It just shows that something is working there. Like, look at us, our economy, fish oil, and so on. But Putin will also lay flowers at the memorial to the heroes of the Alaska-Siberia air route. Now, this is really interesting. This route operated during World War II and became a symbol of cooperation between the USSR and the USA. But before that, what cooperation are we talking about? What lend-lease, really? What kind of help? The Soviet Union defeated Hitler single-handedly. The Allies, well, they tossed in something, maybe a couple of cans of food, a bit of metal. In reality, of course, there was everything: factories, machinery. Why did Putin lay flowers at this memorial? Is he making a statement? No one will tell this to the deep provincials. He's showing that, well, here's the bridge. We honor and respect it. Thank you for Lend-Lease. We understand your role in the victory in World War II, but he briefly laid flowers. Yes, and now they'll also talk about the heroic Soviet pilots who died. But how did they die? And what kind of route is this? The thing is, the rotten West, as they believe in the Russian Federation, in the form of the Americans, delivered about 8,000 planes to the Soviet Union along this route. 8,000 planes? All kinds. Fighters, bombers, amphibious planes, various types. How did the pilots die? Well, Soviet pilots ferried them, but already on the Soviet section of the route, these planes, because of the weather conditions, it was minus 50 degrees there, well, the planes would crash. Maybe not everyone knew how to fly them yet, but they had just barely learned. Well, that's how it was. Out of 8,000, 100 planes were lost, mostly all on the Soviet section. That's how it was. That's how it was. All of this was part of Lend-Lease. By the way, friends, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. It really helps the channel grow. And you can like the video or not, I don't know. And now the topic of how the SBU struck at the traitors of Ukraine. This should have been done a long time ago. So basically the SBU, God Service, accused members of the organization Other Ukraine of information sabotage and in absentia handed down 12 indictments. According to the SBU, this organization operates in Moscow under the guise of a public association. That's exactly right. And soon I'll have a program about how I delved into these new projects. This Other Ukraine is Medvedchuk's project. He just won't stop, that scumbag, let's put it that way, a textbook scumbag. Soon, I'll have a program about how I got involved in these Medvedchuk projects, and these projects are reaching their tentacles not just into Ukraine, there's a lot of interesting stuff there. Some of the people involved will surprise you. It will be released soon. And then they handed it over to various political analysts, some speakers who broadcast in this, well, in the format of this Other Ukraine project. Most of them are traitors who fled Ukraine, and they're absolutely shameless and unprincipled. I mean, they're so far gone. They were working for Medvedchuk even before the full-scale invasion, and now they're still at it. They gathered them all up from the trash heaps. So they scattered, some to Europe, some elsewhere. They all ran off, and then they were gathered up, cleaned up, dressed up, and told, now we're creating a project called Other Ukraine. It's as if you as Ukrainians, before the war, there was this role on various Russian propaganda shows called the Ukrainian to be beaten up. There were a couple of people who played that role. There was one guy, I don't even know his name. He played the role of someone who acted a bit imbecilic. And he would constantly get thrown out of the studio or beaten up. That was the role he played. But these ones play a different role. Like, we are persecuted from Ukraine, but things aren't really like that there. We'll tell you how it really is. There, it's a brotherly nation, and so on and so on. Basically, just like, well, I think that's what this political analyst was talking about. There was a recent case where a political analyst left through Poland to receive some kind of award. I'm not sure if it was a grant or an award. He was also one of Medvedchuk's people, also a traitor, traveling through Poland, and there he was detained and sent back to Ukraine. Here, he gave testimony against all the others. So, in general, some interesting work is starting to happen. And for Europe, Medvedchuk has another project called Voice of Europe, which I've talked about before, Golos Evropy. There's an investigation going on there. There are bribes. They tried to corrupt European politicians, right-wing, far-right ones. In general, it's complete madness. It was a kind of multilingual, supposedly online media outlet. They would invite all sorts of politicians for interviews, sometimes even paying them in cryptocurrency. And these politicians would then spread certain talking points, like that Europe should stop helping Ukraine. Basically, all these projects are aimed at making Europe stop supporting Ukraine. So that's their overall goal. And also to push the idea that things aren't so clear-cut, and that Russia isn't actually the aggressor. And this Voice of Europe project, according to Czech and European intelligence services, was created by Medvedchuk and his assistant. They conducted interviews with people from about a dozen countries. I actually made a note for myself about which countries the politicians were from. Since some of them aren't under investigation, I'll just name the countries. The Netherlands, Germany, specifically Alternative for Germany, because Peter Bistron, or Bistron, I'm not sure of the pronunciation, from Alternative for Germany, is currently on trial. He's accused of taking a bribe, 20,000 euros. So, in other words, there's a court case, an investigation is underway. The Netherlands, Germany, Belgium, Italy, Austria, the United Kingdom, and even the USA. And Hungary as well. Hungary is involved too. There's also a right-wing politician there, but there's no evidence because most of it was done in crypto. But look, they found and caught two people with a rubber box whose bribe was documented and found out that they were paid this money for giving interviews to this platform. So then they took everyone who had given interviews to the platform and asked, did you do it for free? But these two, for example, got 20,000 and someone else even more. Then they raided the offices in Europe, where they also found cash. One had 100,000. And then they started tracking crypto wallets. So, in short, a lot of people are going to get in trouble now. And Hungary. It turns out that Voice of Europe was repeatedly used by Hungarian pro-government media, including those associated with Prime Minister Orbán, as a source of information and a platform for publishing speeches and statements. So, from there, how did it all line up like that? I don't even know. And look at this. Hungary's foreign minister, Syzran, says that Kyiv and Brussels are openly supporting the Hungarian opposition and are hoping for its victory. Let me remind you, the parliamentary elections in Hungary are in 2026, and supposedly this isn't right. It's not good. Why? So what did this Syzran, the foreign minister, say? Today, one of the most important directions of Ukrainian foreign policy is the victory of the TISA party in Hungary's parliamentary elections next year. Kyiv's main efforts are focused in particular on ensuring that Viktor Orbán does not remain Prime Minister of Hungary. Wow. And now Ukraine is to blame for this, right? But I'm curious, why don't people in Ukraine like Orban? Actually, it's not just in Ukraine, let's be honest. Even in Hungary itself. People from Hungary write to me in private messages. They send me information. By the way, thanks to everyone who sends things in. They write that, well, we really, really hate him here. Well, but I'm curious, why does Ukraine actually hate Orban? Ukrainians, let's think about this. Maybe it's because he blocks aid to Ukraine, and maybe because he blocks anti-Russian sanctions. Maybe it's because he wants to gorge himself on Russian oil. Or maybe his funds were frozen because of corruption and pressure on freedom of speech. But that's not what interests us the most. The entire European Union wants to provide aid to Ukraine. Orban is against it. They want to impose sanctions. Orban is against it. Why? Why? And do you know why they're so triggered? Why did Syzran come out? Why have there been so many statements, especially in recent days? It's because Hungary was left without Russian oil due to strikes by the Ukrainian armed forces on the Druzhba pipeline. See how it turned out. Remember, just the other day, when was it, August 12th or 13th, they struck the Unaka linear production dispatching station. And that was it. And the governor, the Russian one, assured the Hungarian leadership that they are repairing it day and night. Well, if that's all, if everything goes well, then in a few days the oil will start flowing again. But in a few days something might hit it again. That's why it's being bombed like that over there. Hungary has been deprived of Russian oil. How could that happen? No, we didn't do anything. It's just war. That's how it goes in war. They say they hit a military base, it landed there or somewhere else. What difference does it make? Is anyone going to report to you about it? Just sit there without Russian oil, you'll get over the withdrawal faster. And what will happen if they can't repair it quickly? Possible scenarios. If it takes a week or two, there will be shortages at gas stations, and fuel prices in Hungary will rise by 10 to 20%. If it takes a month, their major MOL refinery will have to switch to the Croatian route. Fuel prices could then increase by 30 to 40%. And if the situation drags on long term, Hungary will have to reconsider its energy policy. And while I was recording this episode, news came in that there was a fire and explosion in a workshop at the elastic gunpowder plant in the Ryazan region. According to preliminary reports, 5 people have died and 20 have been injured. The workshop building has been completely destroyed. Well, they're saying that drones had nothing to do with it. It just exploded like that, apparently. Well, as they say, ta-da-da-dum-pow. A perfect way to end the episode. Friends, take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, and subscribe to this channel. Let's support the fundraiser for our soldiers.